Here's the demo scenario from previous modules, and I've updated the console project to use .NET Core 3 and also C# 8. I've also removed the null object pattern, as it's more likely that you'll be updating code that doesn't implement that design pattern. If we open up the project XML, notice here that the target framework is set to .NET Core 3, and we've currently got the nullable features of C# 8 disabled here. Let's just close that. If we open up the player displayer class, we're outputting the player name here, and we've also got this null check for the player character that just outputs no player specified and exits the method if the player character argument is null. If we have a look at the program, we can see here we've got this array currently containing 3 player character instances, and down here we're calling the write method of the player displayer, passing in each item in the array. If we build the solution, we can see that we currently don't have any errors or warnings, and if we run this, the program executes without any exceptions. Let's now go and turn on non-nullable reference types. So as we did previously, we're going to set this element to enable. We'll just save that and close the project file, and we'll do another build. This time, if we have a look in the error list, we've got this warning, and if we double click on this, this will take us to the player character, and this warning is telling us that we've got this non-nullable name property that is currently uninitialized. So this is the same thing that we saw earlier in the module. We're getting the warning because we're not providing a default value for a non-nullable string. In C# 7, the intent of this code was not quite as clear. We were implying that the name property might be null in some situations, whereas now we're saying for this player character to be valid, it must have a non-null name. So how do we fix this warning? We could disable and re-enable non-nullable reference types using the compiler directives we saw earlier, but we should instead use this warning to ask ourselves what our intent truly is with this code. In this case, we're going to say that our intent is that a player's name should never be null, so we won't add a question mark to make it nullable, and instead we can specify a default value. So let's go and add a default value for this name property, and we'll just set it to an arbitrary name, Amrit. If once again we build and head to the error list, notice the warning has disappeared. So if we head back to the program, we can update this comment to say now the name property will have a default value. Let's try and set this first player character in the array to have a name of null. Once again we'll build, and once again we get this warning telling us that we're trying to convert a null literal to a non-nullable reference type, in this case the player character's name. So here we've essentially violated the intent that player characters should have non-null names. So let's just undo this change and restore the name to Sarah, and what we'll do now is we'll add a null to this player character array. Once again we'll build, and we get another instance of this cannot convert null literal to non-nullable reference type warning. In this case it's because we're trying to add a null to the player character array, but the definition for this array is saying that we should have non-null player character elements inside it. Once again we can use this warning to make us reconsider the intent of this code. If the intent of this code is that the players array should be allowed to contain null references, we can change the declaration here and add a question mark to make this an array of nullable player characters. If we build, that warning will disappear, but notice we've got these additional warnings now where we're calling the write method of the player displayer class. It's telling us that we're possibly passing null references as arguments to this method. We can also add a fourth write call, passing in the fourth element in the array, which currently is set to null. We could fix these warnings by simply adding the null forgiving operator, And now notice all of the warnings have disappeared. But as we learned earlier, the null forgiving operator should only be used when absolutely necessary, so it doesn't make sense in this example. We're just simply suppressing the warnings and not bothering to think about what the design intent is. So let's go and remove these null forgiving operators. And once again, if we build, we can see the warnings have returned. Let's instead think about the design intent of the player displayer's write method here. Notice this write method takes a non-nullable player character instance, and that's why we're getting these warnings. Also notice there's a bit of a disconnect here. We've got this null check code, but the player character is non-nullable. This parameter is saying that nullable player characters shouldn't be passed to this method, but we've still got null checking code inside this method. In this example, we're going to say that null player characters can be passed in to this write method. To signify this design intent, we're going to add a question mark after the player character here. Now the design intent is more clear. We're saying that this write method can take nullable player characters, and we've also got this null check code to take care of this scenario. And if we build now, notice that these 4 warnings have disappeared. Let's head back to the player character class. Instead of supplying a default value for this non-nullable name property, we could instead add a constructor that allows the name to be set when a player character instance is created. So what we're going to do is come down here, and we'll add a constructor that allows the name to be passed in. This also means we can remove this default value from the property definition. And let's head back to the program. We're getting these errors because we're not providing the required constructor parameter, so let's go and fix these up. For this instance here, we'll provide null for the parameter, and we'll keep the 4th element in the array as a null. Let's try and build this. But notice we've still got this warning here, telling us we can't convert a null literal to a non-nullable reference type. The reason we're getting this warning is because we're providing a null for the constructor parameter, but in the player character here, notice that the constructor parameter here is a non-nullable string. Now the design intent for this code is threefold. We're saying that all player characters should have a non-null name, because both the property and the parameter are non-nullable strings. Secondly, the player displayer's write method here should know how to display null player character instances. And thirdly, in the program, that the player's array here is allowed to have null elements. So I hope this simple refactoring demo shows that when you enable non-nullable reference types for an existing project, you may find it raises a number of questions in the form of warnings, and that you shouldn't just ignore these warnings, but take them as an opportunity to improve the quality and intent of the codebase. While doing this, you may also uncover undiscovered bugs related to nulls in your application.